meant to pull some G's. Come on now. She's been a heck of a, I mean, all kidding aside, that's a big part of how you to really go and do this and go after it. I mean, between work and you look at some of the privateers and how well they do for the fact of that the amount of money, time, and effort it takes. There's a lot to really shoot open competitively. There's a lot of work and cost that goes into it. And I think
I mean, that's a good point. We should just talk about the time commitment too, because that's a good point. Are we live, Mark? We're live. Mark's saying we're live, so
all right.
Maybe we'll do that for a minute. We'll talk about how to afford open, and then I'll circle back and have you guys introduce yourselves, and I'll give a little relationship background there. But we were before we went live here. We were talking about we have a bunch of questions to answer today. The conversation is really about open and what new shooters might need to know, and the question was, how do I afford it? So we were all making jokes about both the cost and the time. And Jimmy, how do you afford to shoot open?
I got a wife with a really good job. that's how you do it. It's expensive, guys. There's no joke about that. But it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of commitment. And I just got lucky with I found someone that understands what I do and why I love it. But there's a lot of expense to it.
Don, are you actually shooting open?
No, I actually just build the guns anymore. I don't even have time to do much of anything else. And when I do, I'm in my Camaro. So, I kind of gave up the whole competitive shooting when I started to become uncompetitive.
Did you shoot open? Was open your game though? Or I'm a limited guy, so I'm not.
Yeah, no, I was open for sure. I mean, it's the most fun you can have with a pistol, in my opinion. But like you said, it gets expensive and it's hard to have more than one hobby. It's hard to go racing, and, be competitive and shoot a lot of open. It's hard to do everything.
Very true.
So it's a two-part thing, right? It's a big time commitment. And then the difference in open is that we're at the highest level, compared to Formula One or drag, fuel drag racing. And because we're running at the highest limit of the mechanics of the guns break more. So I'm sure we're going to circle back into that, but you got to have more guns. That ends up being a thing. One is not an option in open, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. Jimmy, how many guns are you running?
I've got 3 guns right now: a primary, a backup, and then a spare.
And so, how do you run the primary all the time in practice? It's just you run it until it breaks, and then you run the spare. And then they're in a cycle, or is one a practice gun and one's a?
It's a little bit of both. Actually, before you talk about us, I'll get my primary gun. I'll get it broken into where I want it, and I'll have. And talk about this is where it gets expensive, because you're going to have your primary gun, then you got to have your secondary gun. It's got to be as close to the copy as you can get it. So you almost look at getting 2 at the same time. That way you get one, get 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 rounds. Get it where it's really nice and it's tuned, broken in. And that sits. That's what you shoot at matches or tournaments. And then you have your secondary gun, which is your practice gun. And then you have, I went and had a third one built. Usually the third one, you pick up one. That's like, oh my God, everything's broke. I got to finish the match.
Yeah.
So, that's the one that, you at least try to get the same barrel, the same comp, the same port structure. The weight, the frame, the dot, that's important. But as long as you have the same barrel, and comp, because at a match, you have to go chrono with the new gun at a tournament. So you can't go, oh, well, I've got 3 holes in this one, 2 holes in that one. You throw that round into a gun that's designed to run a lower power factor. You have all sorts of issues there. Or a lot of times it's the vice versa of, hey, I got the new gun with 2 ports or smaller ports, and I run that ammo in the old gun, which got 3/8" type holes in it. You don't have enough pressure. And so you end up not being able to compete at major scoring level.
So the way that I would explain it to a new shooter, I had somebody not buy a gun from us not that long ago because they got mad because I explained it this way. But I go, if you're not willing to buy 2, you probably shouldn't be shooting open. You can't buy 2. And so in my thing, it's the old deal. 2 is 1,
yes.
1 is 0, and 3 is 2, right? And ideally, you're going to have one. If you're shooting a lot of rounds, you're going to have 1 open gun in service, going back and forth to service, and you're going to have 2. You need 2 when you roll to a match.
Yes.
I'll pause here for a second. We've probably got enough people watching. Don, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Don Fredenhagen. I own Venom Custom Guns. Been building guns for about 10, 12 years now, give or take. And just happy to be here. Thanks, Adam, for inviting me.
Awesome. Jimmy?
Hey, this, Jimmy Nortz here, Barry's team shooter right now with Tommy Guns here in South Carolina. Been shooting this game probably for about 20 years. I mean, I started up in Vermont and all over the country, shot a lot of different places, a lot of limited for a long time, did well with that. Someone said, hey, try open, you'll get better. And then you get addicted, you know, to Don, we were talking about for everyone joined about, it's just so fun to go that fast. But then you realize how much work it takes to go that fast all the time. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, just watching the dot, you learn a lot. I think that might have been the road they were sending you down, and then you get bit by the. Yeah,
that and the movement and the vision, because you can do things obviously with a comp gun, with the porting, you can engage multiple targets before you go back to a swinger, for example. It allows you to really push out what you thought you could do with an iron sight gun. Now, personally speaking, having shot an iron sight gun maybe a month or two ago, yeah, that gets you some bad habits though, because you'll start just going, ooh, one sight picture, two trigger pulls, not so good with a limited gun.
So I'll tie all this together a little bit. Don and I got to hang out a couple months ago at his place in Nashville, and we were two gun guys kind of having the same experience on slightly different timelines, but really the path of being building guns for USPSA type shooters is pretty much the same. I would argue that everybody in the first 2 or 3 years has a pretty similar experience, and that's the nature of what you're doing. And so we're talking, and basically we have this conversation we're trying to have tonight on how misinformed or the conclusion of that conversation probably was how misinformed some people are about open division and what it really is. And so I'll preface, all the 3-gun guys can probably click off now, because this is really about USPSA, right? Different power factors, so the guns are very different. The wear cycles on the guns are very, so this is primarily focused on USPSA open division and the constraints you're working in there, trying to make power factor at 165 power factor as minimum. Jimmy and I recently just had one phone conversation. He's a friend of my training partner, Randy Lopez, who's an open shooter here in Vermont, our local club president, grandmaster. And so Randy said, hey, Jimmy's talking about going to limited, blah, blah, blah. You guys should talk. And funny enough, I don't know why our conversation ended up talking about open guns. And my conversation with Jimmy prompted me to do something I said I was going to do with Don. 2 or 3 months ago, I had the idea, hey, let's just get on here and tell shooters. So this is a frank conversation. Jimmy and I don't have any loyalty or connection. He's not on our shooting team. I don't owe him any money. As far as I know, he doesn't owe me any money. Don and I just have a similar philosophy about building guns. So we're just here kind of as an educational thing. I think the open gun division or open in USPSA is so just not understood in general. And I'm not taking it. I'm a limited shooter, so I'll discount this a little bit, but I don't want to take anything away from it. It's still the coolest. It's the fastest. We can do anything we want to the guns. There's no rules on the guns. If we want to make the guns 80 ounces, if we thought that would be what won the match, we could do whatever we want. So the coolest part is that the aside from a mag length, the guns are unhinged. We can do whatever we want to them. And a lot of innovations come from that. A lot of, over the last, if you went and looked at somebody shooting an IPSC match in 1981 and look at a 45 ACP with some comp that I'm sure didn't work, and to what we have now, the whole gun industry is watching what USPSA open guns are doing and stealing technology from that. But who, how do you play that game and who has to pay for that? So I'm going to rattle off some questions, and just, these are all questions from users or Instagram folks. And we're going to take questions as we go. I probably have 15 or 20, and we'll just get right into it. So I'll ask you guys to both be super concise here, because we could argue about this all night. 38 super or 9mm? Don, go.
It depends on exactly what you want. If you don't want to pick up your brass, then 9mm. If you want a gun that's easier to tune, ejection's better. There's a bunch of pluses to 38 super, including powder choices. However, I always go 9mm because I'm lazy. I'm not ratting brass after the end of a hot match and all that kind of stuff, or getting aggravated because somebody else picked up my brass and it's got my mark on it. I'm not that guy. So 9mm for me personally.
For me, I went 38 Super Comp. Got to come up with Tilly and shoot with some of the top guys for quite a while. They all just, it's the reliability factor. 38 Super Comp seems to load a little better coming out of the magazine. The powder choices, Don's right. You got a lot of different powder choices in that. It tends to be a little more forgiving too if you have a little extra, a little less. With a 9 major, you're kind of locked in. You're right at what I consider the razor's edge. And that with a Super Comp, you just have a little bit more cushion in there. But I mean, to your point, yeah, middle of summer in South Carolina, yeah, I don't want to pick up my brass either. At 13 cents a casing, you're like, oh boy, you know what I mean? But you do it, and at the end of the day, it turns out to be more reliable, at least for me. I know that over time, the builders have gotten better and better at tuning 9 major guns. I just have, by the time you talk about cost, by the time I buy 2 guns, get a third for the just in case, because being former military, things always break. You look at your match practice, the ammo, the bullets, the powder, the primers, the time, the travel to get to a match and have a gun jam on you and cost you a top 10 finish versus middle of the pack if something jams. It was never worth the risk to me. So even as an old man, I still lean over to pick up that turn brass.
So I'll be the not awesome tiebreaker. So one disclaimer, if you've ever talked to me on the phone or seen me talk about anything, maybe we haven't done a video about this, but if you go to a major match or a local match and you care about where you place, put brand new brass in your gun. It will run 100 times better. Like if you drive 14 hours, buy a hotel room, and then put used brass that's been shot 9 times because you think the guy that picks it up is going to be the one who blows it up. That's on you. Run brand new brass at matches you care about. It's not that much more money. So that's my quick disclaimer. It doesn't matter if it's 9 or 38. I run brand new brass on 40 at majors, if whatever caliber. So I'm totally in agreement with Don. I shoot 9mm typically. That's not a vote for 9mm. I just can't justify the cost of the 38. Where I'll give a real concise thing just because we're trying to dump information here. 38's a straight wall case. You could argue whether that's better or not, but it is a straight wall case. So half the camp thinks that that's better than a tapered case. It's definitely better when it's loading. It's not necessarily better when it's extracting, but a different argument for a different day. The case is longer. You got more case volume, a little bit less pressure. Jimmy touched on that. It's not as much as you'd think. It's still way over what we should be running in them, but it's less. So that helps. I'll tell you the big differentiator between the two. No one makes junk 38 Super brass.
That's fact.
And we're talking mostly about 38 Super Comp for people. But what you're doing is you're eliminating getting that stepped case or that 9mm steel case that's dipped in brass or some. So there's a lot of junk 9mm brass. And then almost all the 38s also have fully supported chambers. So the bulging is not nearly the issue. Like we don't roll 38 Super brass when we clean it. You just don't need to. So 38 wins a little bit there. A few more powder choices. So this is how I tell folks when we sell open guns. I go, if you already have the brass, you're absolutely do 38 Super Comp. It's the thing, or TJ, or whatever you're into. And if you don't, and you're not willing to upfront buy at least 15,000 cases or loaded ammo and then steal the cases from that, then do 9mm.
Mm-hmm.
That's my give or take. And so I'm a 9 guy, but and 9s, we can make the 9s run. That's the 9s run.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question real quick, Adam. How many, because I'm at about maybe 15 9s to 38 Super Comps. How many 9s do you build as opposed to 38s these days?
Probably 20 to 1.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty similar. So, I mean, yeah. And honestly, they run real well. But again, it's like anything else with open. It's about maintenance. It's about keeping an eye on things. It's about understanding the equipment that you have. And I think that's where the misconception is. People grab an open gun and they treat it like their Glock 34, and it just doesn't work that way.
That's a good thing. That's a great point too. Like you talk like some of the hidden costs, not only the brass, but it's the spring cost in your magazine. Not a whole lot, but you got to cycle them a lot more often, because when you start trying to stack 30 or 31 in a tube, you know, you've got to keep an eye on that or it won't feed. And next thing you know, it's coming back, oh, my gun's not working. Well, when was the last time you changed your mag spring? You know, if you're not on a regular quarterly or 6-month cycle, depending on how much you shoot, it's want to dump those into your practice mags, and then you have just match mags.
Well, part of that, Jimmy, is it's accelerated and open, right? So if I'm shooting, I'm making up numbers, but if I'm shooting 30,000 rounds a year in practice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm shooting a limited gun, my slide speed on my limited gun is slower than my open gun by a fair amount. So the longer the slide has, if the slower it is coming back, the longer my bullet and my mag has to come up. So the open gun's going to be more sensitive to a bad mag spring.
Yes.
And then same thing with the extractors, right? So when you fire a case in a gun, right, the case expands to the outside of the chamber. And so, you know, fire forming is what they call it. But the more pressure, the more it's plastered on that wall, the harder it is to pull out. We're going to wear out extractors way faster.
Yes.
Right? Extractors need to be retuned or they break or whatever. So when you speed up the timing in the gun, no different than if I put race fuel in somebody's car, right?
Yeah.
Everything's accelerated now. It gets hotter. Everything's moving faster. It's going to wear. These are metal, and the guns are mechanical. I know that the guns are expensive, and I know that they can cost anywhere from Don, what do you get for an open, like a full tilt open gun? Like
full tilt now is about 6,500. You know, so
right, up to some of the competitors of ours.
Yes, 8, 9, 10,000. Oh yeah, they're crazy out there. Yeah.
And so I know that they're expensive, and you want to buy, right? You want to buy a piece of hardware and go, all right, well, I bought it and I'm done. But don't think about it any different than a car or a motorcycle, right? Look, the more I go out and use it, the more it's worn, the more the value decreases, and the more it's going to require maintenance. So if we're using this as a racing tool and all we want to do is win matches, it's just a matter of how do I build a system? Anybody who listens to us talk here at Atlas about stuff, everything's about a system, right? Like, when do I do maintenance? When do I change springs? Like, I have my mag system for my limited guns is every 6 months for mag springs. For open, maybe half that every quarter. You got to have a system, and these are all mechanical things, and we're racing. And the best part about racing is sometimes the guys who are prevailing are the guys who have a better system, right? I might be 1% not as good as the guy next to me, but my gun loads rounds every time, and I'm not racking anything out during a match. There's 1 second, right? At least.
Well, and it is racing. I mean, if you show up with your stock car to the drag strip, yes, you run it, and you go home. But if you're running an 8-second car, it takes a lot of maintenance. You might be changing plugs between rounds. You're doing all sorts of different things. These open guns, you got to keep the screws tight. You have to, like you said, the extractors have to be tuned. Got to keep an eye on the injectors. You have to keep an eye on everything in that gun to make sure that the system stays working. And that's where people don't do it. That, they'll this, Adam, they'll call you and say, I just lost the screws. And it's like, well, did you check them? Are you, you could have a grip falling off before you know it.
What, Jimmy or Don, why do they lose the screws? They don't know. People don't know this.
Well, because they don't, you don't ever check them. You don't tighten them, Loctite them,
Well, Loctite doesn't like heat.
No, it doesn't like heat.
Guns are hot.
Well, that's why titanium composites stay tight no matter what you do with them. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So, the whole gun's held together with Loctite screws, right? And so you get a comp up to 350, 400 degrees. Your Loctite's now liquid. It's running out of the gun. And at some point, it's going to loosen up very quickly. I've got tons of internet questions coming, so we might do some of these might be fast. Don, this one's just for you. Are you going to do it external extractors anytime soon?
No.
We're prototyping that. I don't know if it's going to be for open guns. The slide speed on open guns is just yanked so hard that it's very difficult. But we're prototyping it for limited guns.
Listen, I would just like to see regular, good old fashioned spring steel extractors come back into vogue. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that would be great. I'd be happy about that.
I got nothing there. I got nothing.
It's a pain. That's a painful process, Don. We look hard at that. It's on the drawing board here. It might get 86 for the externals. Jimmy, you're going to get bumped here for a second on technical questions. In fact, we'll give you this one first, Jimmy. You must have an opinion. Hybrid versus standard barrels.
I'm a big hybrid fan. It lightens the slide up.
Okay, Don?
As far as which one do I think is better, or which one would I prefer if I had my own?
Cool.
I like hybrid barrels. I like the bull barrel too, though. Personally, I like anything that's mid-length. So it could go either way.
Yeah, you're punting that a little bit to mid-length because I think the mid-length, so that's our chaos gun, whatever. We only build mid-length. I think most everybody's building mid-length these days. So a mid-length gun is the traditional guns back in the day had a 5-inch barrel, and then they added 400 thou with threading. So it was a 5.4-inch barrel. What I think SV started it, and we were probably the second guys on that train, was to come back and take the 5-inch barrel and thread it backwards and not add the 400, but thread it back. And then what that allowed, I think we were the first ones. I don't want to brag, but we were at one point we were running the dust covers right to where the comp is. And then somebody said, well, why can't you run it the whole way? And I'm like, I don't know. And then we did it, and they were like, well, the best part about this is when your comp comes loose because you got the gun too hot, and it doesn't fall off. It doesn't lock the gun up.
That never happens, right? Never happens.
So people are asking more questions about island barrels. Will Atlas ever do them? Here's why I don't like island barrels. I don't like to weaken the structure of the front of the slide. So if I'm pinching this gun as hard as I can and I can't stop it, I can take almost any island barrel I've ever seen and I can pinch the front of that and it will stop. Well, what that tells me is that this is flexing a little bit, and I know that my accuracy is going to count on the bottom of that barrel coming up into the right spot. Mm-hmm. Do I think for sure every time that you fit one, it's going to maybe make an accuracy thing? No. I don't like the idea of changing my structure here in the chance that it might give up some accuracy, as well as now I've got to worry about a clearance up here that might make a contact point. And all the early island barrels had issues with cracking.
They did. They were not. Yeah, they did not have the bevel in the back. They were basically straight walled, and that was a bad move.
Right. So they've come a long way. I think they're better than they were. Atlas has no plans. I'd rather cut my slide back to save the weight than I would to do an island barrel. So we're just not island barrel folks here. You can't get an Atlas with an island barrel. If I want my sight to not move, I'll put a block up front. The blocks give me more options, and I don't change my integrity of my slide. So everybody has a different opinion of that.
Right. But I like island barrels as well. I mean, honestly, obviously, I haven't seen any accuracy issues with them. Guys have got a lot of rounds through them. It does track different. It's just like anything else. It does feel different, and it probably is a tad softer. But again, when the buzzer goes off, it's all about how many rounds you have through your gun and how well you know your gun. You know, let's face it, Max Michel won how many national championships with a true bore barrel. So, you know, it is what it is. But,
the barrels, and so if you're a new shooter, right, and I'm trying to preface all this in new shooter stuff,
sure.
Super technical, and that's because that's what they're asking questions about because they're about to order a gun. So if you need a hybrid barrel, call Don.
I'll do it for you.
And but the thought process here is whatever system, whether you decide to do a hybrid barrel or not, try to do something that's repeatable. So if you're not buying two guns at once, try to buy something you know you'll be able to get parts for, because Jimmy alluded to this earlier. You want the guns to be the same. So it's crazy to say this out loud. I don't even have USPSA Area 7 is, I'm going to shoot this Friday, my first match of the year. COVID kind of messed shooting up here, and we're busy as can be. And so I'm going to go shoot a blind. I'm going to shoot a brand new Nemesis. I didn't have an open or a limited gun to go shoot with at all. And so I'm going to roll in there with a brand new gun and hope for the best. And I've done this before. We're probably in good shape. But I've never been in the position myself where I could own 2 or even 3 of the exact same gun. And that is the dream, right? And so I made this pitch to USPSA earlier this year. And I wrote them a letter and said, hey, the power factor is too high. We should lower the power factor. And I go, one of the reasons is it's not safe. And the second reason is it's not fair from dollar perspective. So when we're running 165 plus power factor, we wear the guns out prematurely. The guy who can afford 6 of the same exact gun has an advantage over the guy who got there with 1. And I've never been in that position. Now, at this point, Atlas is big enough. Can I tell the guys to make me 3 guns that were identical? Yeah. But what happens is somebody calls and goes, I desperately need a gun. And
that's what happens. It happens every time I build myself one. It leaves right away.
Right. There's always somebody who blew one up and there's an emergency, this and that. So again, it's a cost thing. If try to do something, whatever you do with a barrel or a gun or a system, that's very repeatable because you want to pick that backup gun up and have it feel exactly the same.
But I also want to touch on the power factor thing for just a different perspective. As far as the cost of having open guns, nobody goes from open back to production, or it's very rare. I mean, by the time you get to open, it's kind of like top fuel drag racing or anything else. Very seldom these guys go back to a stock class. And the problem is it's a gateway out of the sport if we're not careful, because of the fact that people do get sick and tired of breaking guns. They get sick and tired of spending that money, and they get, kind of get tired of it, and they move on. And you hate to see that. You don't want to have an exit out of the sport due to a financial cost. If somebody gets bored of shooting,
it's just not being fun. What's
right.
fun if your gun's always broken and you're back and forth, and it's just not fun.
It's not fun. And the sad thing with open is you're also seeing across the industry, you and I have touched on this, warranty is becoming less and less. And because of the fact that these things are, thoroughly abused, and that's kind of the nature of the beast, but nobody's going to give you a lifetime warranty into these things, and nobody's going to be replacing slides in years to come when these things break. It's all going to be on the shooter, and that's something to keep in mind. And like that alludes to what you said is you can't be competitive, and shoot a ton of matches on just one gun, because sooner or later it's going to let you down, and you're going to have to grab the spare. You need at least one spare gun for sure.
Yep. Bare minimum in open. Open more than any other. So you shouldn't do this, but I've shot a limited gun for 2 seasons straight, not having a backup in the truck. That's when we started Atlas. So we start Atlas. I have 3 limited guns. They're all 6-inch. They're all not identical, but pretty close. That's the most guns I've ever owned for this sport. And then we start Atlas, and we clean them all up and sell them all. Everything went to fund the company. And so I had a brand new sight block gun that I shot 2 or 3 seasons, I think, but 2 with no backup gun in the truck, right? And I got through. In limited, can you do it? Yes. It's still risky. It's not smart, but it's with open. It's not even a question. If you don't have a backup gun, don't bother going to the match. If you really care, if you're okay with getting in the truck and driving home and going, yeah, I only shot a half a match because my gun quit. And so that's one of the big questions we have here. If I only shoot, they're going to hold it back up for me. If I only shoot 4 or 5 matches a year, do I really need 2 guns? Only if you care. My answer: if you only if you care about how you place. If you are not super mad when you drive home because your gun had one little extractor issue, then okay. I'm going to push us away from the power factor conversation because I kind of want to end on that on purpose. But I want to dump a bunch of information for the new guys before we scare the snot out of them. So I'll start, Jimmy. I'll let you go first on this one. How many rounds do you think before a gun's shot out? This is a generic question off the internet. We'll just roll.
General rule, you're probably someplace north of 60,000. Depends on who the builder is. Depends on the power factor too. What you're running, what type of bullet you're running. My last year in Arizona, I actually wore 2 barrels out of an open gun, out of 2 different open guns shooting, because you had the ability. Phoenix is like the mecca for shooting. You can shoot a match, 3-4 matches a week out there, more than I could pull and handle. Okay, there's a lot of shooting, and I mean, you start getting up to those, start running particularly major power factors. You start running your popple holes with your bigger comps. You're driving a lot of pressure, a lot of gas pressure. You'll wear barrels out a little bit quicker. I'm usually someplace around about 40,000. I start to see degradation in accuracy, and then it's like, is it an inch? Is it what's the variation in the accuracy at that point in time?
I see usually a little bit more. We're 70 to 100 on an open gun, and then on a limited gun, you're 100 to 125. Generically, I've seen 150. Don, are you seeing guys wearing barrels? What the service life is the big question. And so there's different levels to this. Jimmy, did you rebuild those guns at 60K or did you dump them?
I just had them rebarreled. The builder was good. The builder was still tight, so the frame and all that was still good fit there. It was just a matter of putting a new barrel in. Oh, that's right. And then Schumann doesn't make barrels anymore, and then you're screwed if you want an island barrel.
Well, again, come back to systems. I like that.
AKM's building them. So
right. But it's different. But that wouldn't drop into the same slide per se. You might be cutting the slide.
Yeah.
So how many rounds of an open gun before it's dead, Don?
It depends. I mean, it depends on the barrel manufacturer, depends on the barrel, depends on the reloader. But I agree with Jimmy on that. Somewhere around 60, 70,000, usually is where you start to see certain things going. And at that point, I try to get my customers, if they are wearing out a barrel at that point, I try to get them a slide as well, just for the simple point of in this day and age, it's almost crazy, and especially at 9, to put a slide or put a new barrel in a gun that's got 60,000 rounds on the original slide. At that point, I'm pushing real hard for a complete upper, just for longevity. Because you definitely want to put a barrel in a gun, and 2 weeks later the slide cracks. I mean, that's a bad idea.
So my goal with every open gun is to get them to 50K, and then we wait for a barrel or a slide to break.
Yep.
And then when that happens, we evaluate whether we do a whole top end or just that part.
Right.
And they're easy to put. You can push them. I think you can push them. I mean, we don't have a problem pushing guns to 100. I have one Chaos out there that has over 100,000 rounds. It has never been back to the shop.
That guy's a good reloader.
It never broken one part, right? And there's 2 things that happen there. That's Robert's good. He's a good reloader, really good reloader, and he got lucky.
Yeah.
He got lucky.
And as far as round count too, it's kind of hard. It's almost like miles on a car. It depends on if we're talking about, I mean, I've got guys who have 60, 70,000 rounds through guns with no problems, but I also have guys that put 70,000 rounds through them in a year. That's a whole different set of abuse. You know what I'm saying? When their practice sessions are 4,000 rounds and that gun is, beyond hot. And, so it depends. I mean, round count's a tough one because some of these guys, like Jimmy said, in these areas where you can just shoot a match all the time. So they're either shooting matches or practicing all the time. Well, those guns tend to wear out a lot faster than the guy who has the gun for 4 or 5 years and he shot 10,000 rounds a year type of a thing. I mean, I've got guys, one guy in particular, hi Max, he probably shot maybe 50,000 rounds through it in like 6 months. You know what I mean? Yeah. 2 different guns with that round count. So it's those, the guys who are good in practice a lot, they're hard on their equipment. It's a tool for sure.
So to boil that down in one sentence, heat is the enemy.
It's a killer.
Right?
Remember the famous internet picture or the I think it was Instagram picture that Max Michel was practicing, and he's got like 3 or 4 guns out, and he's got like a portable fan on him, trying to cool the guns down. So he's literally got 3 or 4 of the same ones, and he's cycling them out because they'd get too hot in a practice session.
Just a tool.
So that's a question that was up here: is how do I cool the guns? And I mean, you can put some air on them, but really it's time, right?
Yeah.
You set the gun. You got to set the gun down and let. So if I know one open shooter who's got 3 guns and he runs them all at practice, and he has someone else loading ammo for him.
Ugh.
How hard they go, and it's set one down, pick up another one.
Yeah.
You got 2 cooling, and one going. Somebody's putting up a side question. Do you put them in a cooler? That might make a slight difference, but ideally they're air cooled, right?
Yes.
I don't like a big temperature swing in it.
No, I don't either.
Environment. So I would avoid the cooler, air cool the guns, and watch So another thing we see brand new open guys do is they'll go run bill drills like a maniac with a brand new gun. And I guarantee you that if you really get out, you run 1,000 rounds of bill drills, and you're gonna take that Loctite off of that comp, guaranteed.
Oh, absolutely, especially titanium. It heats up so quick.
And that's all it is. It's just the heat transfer to the stuff goes liquid. It's gone. So cool my gun down. I'm just running through. We got tons. This is an interesting question. Can I run a bare bones gun in open division? So I'll give you my 2 seconds. Generically, I think the answer is no. I don't know how bare bones this question really is rooted in. But if you're talking about an open Glock, no. No one does that for any long period of time. They're not made to do that. The part of the problem with the Glock style barrels is that they unlock quickly. So they're well unlocking while there's still massive pressure coming back, and that's no faster way to beat your gun apart.
Well, and it's a shorter overall cartridge too, which is not helping your situation either.
Right, not a big chamber. Unless you had a 3 chamber.
But no, as far as bare bones go, I agree. But a bare bones open gun, could you run a plastic ripped, old STI type of thing and be competitive? Absolutely. If you're talented, you're talented. But yeah, if you want to take a Glock or something else and try to make it into an open gun, no, I would stick with carry optics at that point for sure.
Yeah. There's no way around the right tool for this game, it's multiple tools at that.
So at Atlas Gunworks, we run a service program. One of the questions is how often should a Chaos, an open gun, come back for service? And we usually say, once a season is probably appropriate there. Don, are you doing something like that?
No, basically, whenever they call and need something, send it in. I probably should do a service plan like what you're doing. It's a good idea. because it also helps people to stay mindful of it. I mean, it's, because you have guys who shoot all year round, and then you got guys who shoot primarily in the summer, don't do a lot in the winter. Well, that gun sits there. It's a great time to tear it apart, really go through it, change all the springs, possibly change the extractor depending on how the hook and everything else looks. So yeah, I think the service plan is a good idea. Even if it's just to keep people's mind on the fact of keeping these things maintained and tuned up all the time.
Let me throw one more thing in there, Don, just for a thought. What we catch in the service program is somebody who did something wrong that they didn't know about. Like they took a spring out of a package on a limited gun and it said 11 pounds, but it was a 6-pound spring.
Sure.
That'll break your gun fast. I've had 2 guys break slides with open guns or limited guns because they both bought 11-pound springs. The package said 11 pounds, mislabeled. It was a 6-pound spring. They couldn't feel the difference, and you shoot them till the front of the slide cracks because it's bashing in. So when the gun recoils, right, there's a reverse plug tunnel in our slide, and that comes back and hits our guide rod. That's why we like shock buffs here. But and that's slamming motion right there, all the way back when it hits in the back.
Absolutely.
That's going to break at the reverse plug tunnel if the impact's too much. You don't see open guns do it all that often, but if you were under sprung, it would crack right here. And so a lot of times we just catch folks doing weird stuff. So I like it a lot especially for the newer shooters is, hey guys, you put a spring that was too long in it on a stroke gun.
Yeah, that's the other one. Absolutely.
Right. Jimmy, how did you handle that?
From a spring standpoint, I actually, and this goes back to your initial question, the hidden cost. I actually bought the spring testing kit, where you actually take it, you scale it, you make sure, hey, do I have the right size or right weight pound spring I have going into the gun? There's some guys down here that, running 7 pounds. With a 38 Super Comp, the way I prefer to shoot, I like to take out as many of the variables as possible. So something like that, I'll run, 8 or 9 pound spring, depending on how new the gun is, because I want to make sure I can strip all the rounds off. I see people running that to get, someone said run a 7 pound spring, and they've got really stiff mag springs, and the gun jams on the first shot. So there's a balance there. I always get a little concerned because, again, talking about cost, is that unless you can afford multiples, you start going, hey, I start lighting up these springs, get to the point, yeah, it's great when the top shooters are doing that and they break it and they hand it back, like an SV or pick one of the big companies that, oh yeah, here's another one and go shoot it. Yeah, that's not, so you start looking at, that gets to the point of racing where you just can't afford to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we treat these like motorcycles or cars or whatever. If you're racing them, whoever built them should be looking at them, it might be once every 2 or 3 years, but just that off chance you catch them. A great example, because the guys that are really racing hard, they're so focused on shooting that they're not paying much attention to the equipment, even when they're looking at it. So a good example of this, I had a gun come back for service, and the breech face just started to have some pitting on it, right? So that's an ammo problem. So you call them and you're like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, how many rounds are on the gun? And they're like 20-something thousand. And I'm like, something's changed, because we saw that gun at 10,000. It didn't look like this, right? And so what you start to realize is they changed primers and they changed powder, and now they're getting blow through, and they're getting pressure coming back through the primer pocket, and that's wrecking the breech face. So it's little stuff like that where I think that, look, the guns is what we do all day. Don does it all day. When we look at a gun, we're going to do a better job than somebody who's thinking about racing, right? The race cars sometimes with a mechanic, but not on teams that win, right? On those F1 teams, the drivers are worried about driving, and the mechanics are worried about making the teams good. Yeah,
so Adam, from that standpoint, like for a cycle, like I'll get at the beginning of the season, obviously all the springs, at the end of the season, all that stuff goes. And then I'll change out all the springs, the Aftec springs, your guide rod, your mainspring. I'll change everything out, test it, get it ready to go. And then I'll run it, and I'll probably get, depending on how much or when the tournaments line up. But really after that, the big thing I watch for is on the Aftec, and then with the recoil, your recoil spring, I'll swap that out. Right now I like I've been using the Springco, the cryo treated ones. Those seem to last, I probably get really good distance out of those. And then to your point, I'm a huge fan of shock buffs. I know some people don't like them. I like the aluminum ones in there. Anything to help eliminate the wear and tear in the gun. I just think it's smart.
I like the shock bottle shock buffs as well. I mean, I think the aluminum ones are good. And I've never had one tear apart yet. You know what I mean? So it's like if you keep an eye on them and change them out every so often, I think it's a good product. I actually like them a lot. I ship every gun now that I make with it. So I'm with you. I'm sold on them.
So I agree. I'm going to disagree with both of you. I hate the aluminums. Look, when you put a shock buff in the gun, we're trying to do two things. We're trying to lessen the impact, right, of the slide to the guide rod. And so the problem that I have with the aluminum and we're also shortening the stroke of the gun, right? Whatever the thickness is there, I can't come back that much. So we run the soft Wilson ones. A lot of people don't like that. But what it is it's insurance, right? So in the way that soft buff works is that the gun has an overpressure, it has an extra hard impact, and we got a big cushion here, and it's a rubbery type. What I don't like about the aluminums is that they're much stiffer, and we don't get quite that, impact resistance or buffer. And I might be biased here, but early in the day, we used to service other folks' guns, and I can't tell you how many broken guns I've seen with aluminum buffs in them. So I'm not an aluminum fan. And if you put an aluminum one in your Atlas, you're going to void your warranty. So don't do that.
That's good to know.
You're welcome to run the Wilson soft one or no buff. But and so that leads us into the next thing, right? We're talking about de-stroking and stroking, and there's all this crazy internet talk about what stroking is, and almost no one knows what it is. So I'm going to explain it, and then we're going to talk about whether or not we think it makes sense. So the stroke of the gun, how far this rearward travel is of the slide, is what we're talking about. So when a gun's stroked, you can cut the front of the slide so we get a little extra travel backwards. And so this is an Atlas Chaos. We're a little weird about it. So we stroke the slides 200 thou back and then put 100 thou buffer in there. So this has 100 thou more travel than a standard gun with the buff in it, and then 200 if you took the shock buff out. And some of the new fad is de-stroking the guns. So you can just start, we never cut anything. So the rearward travel, instead of being here, would be here. And then we add buffs and the rearward travel starts to be here. So Jimmy, are your guns stroked?
My guns are not stroked.
They're not.
I've shot a couple of that have been stroked, buddies of mine. And what I find, for me personally, my feeling is that it changes the pivot point of the gun.
It does, yeah.
On how the gun tracks. So it just, having shot limited for a long time with unstroked guns, I like all of that out in front. I don't like that rolling motion. I feel like it's casting back over me. It's just my own idiosyncrasy. Some people love it. I've never seen the value to it for the way that I like to shoot.
5.4 barrel or a 5.0 barrel?
We're running everything in limited was a 5-inch barrel.
No, but what's in your open guns?
Oh yeah, open gun is it's the 5.45.
So you've got a full length gun.
Yeah, 5-inch gun with the thread on the end of it.
Yep. Don, your thoughts?
As far as stroking goes, I don't stroke the guns that I build. And again, back to like Jimmy's point, I agree. I think it changes the pivot point, but it's all in what you're used to. So somebody like for me who came from shooting back in the day, and they've been stroking guns for a long time. I mean, they were stroking them back in the IPSC days. I mean, it's been going on a long time. But yeah, I don't do it. I guess for me personally, it seems like trying to correct some problem that doesn't exist. But like you said, you can get into problems too where people are stacking buffs these days to de-stroke them, which I don't agree with either. You know what I mean? So, it seems to be awfully common that guys are using 2 and 3 buffs to try to shorten it up, which again,
So what we're all chasing is that perfect zero, right? So the gun lifts, returns the exact same spot. And so what the stroking gives you, whether you need it or not, and it might hurt in some cases, is it gives you a little more rearward travel. So we got a little more like the weight. This is what Jimmy's talking about, the pivot, the weight's behind you. And then the slide starts from a further back spot. So that transfers a longer position. So go back to my thing. If you're looking at buying an open gun, it's all a system, right? Yes. So if your comps, whatever your comp weighs, do you have a long dust cover? How much does my slide weigh? How long is the stroke on the gun? Do I have a metal grip? Do I have a heavy magwell? It is all a system that's all tunable. And without getting way into depth, it's about your grip pressure, right? So different grip pressures require, more weight here or there to get the gun to do this zero return that we're chasing. The open game's the guns are a lot better You know, what Don and I are building are way better than they were 10 years ago, probably even way better than they were 5 or 6 years ago. The mid-length guns do a lot. There's a lot of ideas and technology flowing out there. So I do think that the guns are, from a functional return to zero point, they're all better than they were 5 years ago, right? So we're, you know, we started building these 5 or 6 years ago. First ones were all 5.4 inch guns. They had short, thin, narrow dust covers like that. I mean, that seems like 25 years ago.
Well, do you remember back in the day though, everybody wanted a light gun. Everybody wanted everything that was super light, lighter, the faster transitions. Now everybody wants, you know, the steel grip and the stainless steel mag well that weighs 8 pounds and the whole 9 yards. So it's gone 180 the opposite direction. Everybody wants all that weight. But you know, nowadays with the titanium comps and everything like that, you don't have that front weight. Now everything's kind of in your hands and above your hands, which is really nice. It's not sticking out at the end of the gun, which I personally like. And I'm a huge fan of the MIDI. I think the MIDI is the king of the right. I love it. Do it, but. Fantastic. Jimmy, we're gonna have to MIDI, buddy.
Yeah, you got to give me MIDI. I like. Here's the thing. I've always laughed about this because I'm not a small guy, but I am recoil adverse. So like that old style guns, they shoot soft. Real soft.
It's like driving a Cadillac.
Yeah. Hey, it's kind of what you used to. But I've shot a couple of my buddies. I've got middies and I've shot those, and actually got to mess around one of the chaoses down here in South Carolina. That was, there's some different technology on those. Definitely different technology, the way they shoot. They cycle a little bit quicker. So a lot of the stuff that we've done with the older guns were like with the heavy duty machining and the scalloping out of the slides, taking as much weight as you possibly can out. You're able to do that by shortening it up and getting the longer dust cover to balance it out a little bit. There's some very, very cool things out there now.
Oh, absolutely. And now we're not trying to push those big old Dawson awesome comps that weighed, 6 pounds, and everything else. I mean, all that's got to move. And nowadays with these small titanium comps that, accomplish the same thing, it's amazing how much faster everything moves and how much better it all works. Because before it was a science to try to get as much weight, like you said, out of the slide, enough to get that thing to operate the way it should with these gigantic comps that they used to have.
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh man, I'm so glad we're out of that era.
Yeah, old school. I still like a steel comp. I like a nose heavy gun though, but that's how I came up shooting. That's the way I like it.
That's what you're used to.
Yeah, and that goes back to your question. No matter what you get honestly, if you're going to play open, get a couple of them and shoot the daylights out of it, and understand how you like to shoot, the mechanics of how your body operates the gun.
Well, and that's the other thing, open, that people don't understand, is open is almost like a constant evolution in yourself as well. Where you start in an open gun is not where you're going to finish. If you shoot a frame length of time and become competitive, you are going to change. You're going to find things that you like, and things will evolve over time. So, I've got guys that build different guns because they want to try something different. And then we have guys who are really good. A lot of top GMs, they'll just, in their next set of builds, they just tweak a little bit here and there. Or, we start putting weight up front, or we start putting weight back. They're evolving. They know exactly what they want, it's fantastic. It's really hard with a new shooter because they always say, what do I need or what do I want? And open is such a personal, subjective thing, and that's, you can't somebody else's gun and say, I want the same thing. It doesn't work.
I so agree with you. And there's such a big dynamic that we touched a little bit on the beginning. It has to do with the powders and what's the velocity, what's the load you're going to use. HX6 versus, 3N38 versus CFE pistol.
Yep.
There's a whole bunch out there.
HX6, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then so you can get a gun, and then you could have a 170 power factor load with 4 different powders and get a completely different feel.
Oh, absolutely, and completely different dot tracking. From straight up and down to the figure 8 to the squiggly all over the place, and that's basically, and that's what I tell people. When you're target practicing, when you go out there and you're sighting in that gun, that's the time you actually feel the recoil, whether it's violent, whether it's soft, whatever. It's how that gun tracks that's important. It's that follow-up shot, because once that buzzer goes off, you're not going to notice any of it. It's kind of like having a pound trigger pull. Well, you're giving it 10 pounds on the run, so it really basically feels much better in dry fire than it does once the buzzer goes off, because once the buzzer goes off, you're not thinking about any of that. Same thing with recoil. It's how fast does that gun work for you? And sometimes that could be the gun the load that feels the most violent, during target practice, but yet tracks better once the buzzer goes off. It's all about that follow-up shot. It's about how fast you can transition from one target to the other with confidence. And sometimes that's not the easiest load on your hands, but you got to find that balance.
Particularly if you're grabbing a PT grip with that aggressive.
It's funny. I work with my hands all day and I have calluses and stuff. And it's funny because these guys, they'll send me pictures back of like the blood on the grip, and I'm like, guys, there comes a point where diminished returns, you know what I mean? It's like, you shouldn't be bleeding all the time, you know? Plus,
that's just more dry fire.
oh my God. Well, you know how it is too. Nobody likes to get a gun back with half your flesh still stuck to it. It's like, I don't know. So a lot of guys, I tried to, like my own personal one before I sold it, I would take that down a little bit. So, I mean, I can squeeze just fine. The gun's not going to move around.
Yeah.
So we'll fire off the last 10 minutes here. We'll probably cycle back to generic conversation about power factor and stuff, but I try to fire off a couple questions while we're here. Somebody's asking 38 Super, can it be shot out of can 38 Super and Super Comp? So the chamber's the same. The rim case diameter is different, right? So real 38 Super has a bigger diameter case. It's got a rimmed case, a slight rim on it. And so the extractor on our guns, you just adjust the extractor, change the extractor, you go between the two. The guns might cycle each other. But
that's it. Some of them work perfectly fine. Other ones need a little something,
So that's just an extractor change. But the chamber of your barrel is 38 or it's not.
Right.
TJ's the same thing. The TJ's got probably the nicest case. Some way over engineering there, but you need to have a different extractor angle to kind of hook that up, right? But it's just extractor angles. If I can afford it, should I go right to shooting open, or should I get better in production before I transition?
Jimmy? If you can afford it, go to open.
It depends on the era and where you came up. Coming up with some of the older shooters, like with Pat Cochran and Jason Kuhn, some of those guys, it's like you started to gut your fundamentals down. You understood your footwork. When you're shooting for my personal opinion, when you're shooting a iron sight gun, your footwork, your ability to call your shots, because you don't have umpteen bullets. It's not just run around and spray. It's really, you have to be able to shoot a gun. You have to be able to call shots. I mean, you look at any of the old guys, you put something that's not multiple rounds in their hand, you start going, wow, you realize how good they are very, very quickly. So I'm always a big fan of, again, this ties into cost. So a couple different angles here of one, come in, learn the game, learn how to shoot it. Because if you go in and you find out you don't like it and you've got a $7,000 open gun, or in this case, 14 grand in open guns, never mind scopes and everything else you're going to have duplicates of. That's like, you're never going to get that back out of it. So make sure it's what you really want to do before you get in. So I would say if you can get to, depending on what you want to do, you get to A or even master class in production, then make the jump. Because at that point, you're going to know enough about how to look at a stage, how to shoot it, how to understand how to move through a course of fire. Granted, it'll be different with an open gun, obviously, but you're going to understand the dynamics of it versus getting an open gun where you can get yourself into situations where you're just shooting at everything instead of actually understanding how to lay out a course of fire. But that's old school. Some of the new, I just saw some of these kids shoot. I just shot with
Listen, I'm in the school of like, you got to learn all that crap anyway. Grab an open gun, have a ball. Life's only so long. You know what? Honestly, like, it is, we're older guys.
Yep.
I wish I would have gotten open when I was younger and actually, like super fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I was about to say that.
Yeah, I went to it just because I can't see anything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Don, I got a chance this North Carolina match. I got to shoot with a bunch of the GMs at the match, like with Tilly and Drummond, and they got a kid they've been working with, Aaron Edmonds, who's just, my God, he moved like Todd in his prime. It was just fun to watch. You're like, I don't know how he did some of that stuff fast, but hey, maybe when I was 20-something years old, I could have pulled that off. It was just fun to watch. There's just zero hesitation. It's just literally wide open. It was so fun to watch.
They're super aggressive. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
No hesitation.
None.
So I'll make this a little simpler, I think. Look, if you're on the fence, just decide you're not going to do it. And if you wake up 3 mornings in a row and it's all you can think about, then just do it because you need to do it.
Yep.
The weird thing is, that's kind of how I judge on whether I'm going to switch to do something different.
Yep.
The thing that you got to understand is almost everyone ends up in open. I say this a lot in jest, but look, we shoot open. One of the reasons you shoot open is your eyes can't do what they used to do, right? Mm-hmm. And so somewhere between 48 and 68, we're all going to be in a zone where we're either going to be really slow with irons or we're going to move over to open or now we have carry optics, so there's some other choices. But the dot used to be the only thing. Open used to be, there was a cachet of guys who just from a vision standpoint made a lot more sense. So that's my 12-second. If you can't stop thinking about it, just do it now. Just a one-word answer, or one-word answer. Jimmy, what are you running for recoil spring poundage?
8.
Don?
8.
We're 8 too. I sometimes you see guys need 9s or 7s, but 8's the starting point. So, real quick, we're going to do this, and then we'll cycle on to the last 5 minutes here, where hopefully we get to talk a little bit about the power factor. But somebody's asking, hey, I shoot 3-gun. I want to dabble in USPSA Open. My 2-second answer on that is they're really different guns. Like in 3-gun, I want 145 power factor design gun with a comp with a slide right optic that fits in a regular holster that I can have a shield on, or a cover on. So I think they're different guns. If you care about whichever one you care about more, get the gun for that one.
Agreed.
You don't want to shoot 3-gun with this big honking thing. Don?
Agreed. I actually just sold a shorty hybrid titanium comp for a guy who shoots mostly 3-gun, but he's going to dabble in USPSA, and it's perfect for him because he can go to major power factor, he can shoot a few matches a year, and for the most part, the gun will serve him just perfectly fine in 3-gun. But I agree, get the one that you're going to shoot the most, and if you do transition to where USPSA becomes your bag, then you can always sell that gun and build yourself what you need.
I agree completely. There's to your point, like you said, there's only so much time in your life. If commit to the one that you really want to shoot. Put the money in the top equipment to do that particular version. If you change your mind, to your point, pick up. That's where I think like a 9 Major would be great, because you're not going to go on and invest in tons of super comp brass like some of us fools have, and then you can then you go out and play in it. And when you get out of it, if you get something decent, if you figure out you don't like it, you can someone's always looking to buy a secondary gun.
Yep.
So I will wrap this up here because Instagram's going to kick us off here in 5 minutes or so. But the Open's expensive, and it's two guns to be competitive on the cheap, maybe 10 grand, but probably we're talking about 12 or 14,000 bucks for 2 guns, and that's kind of you're going to pay a little more for the ammo as you go, and you're going to pay more in service and more downtime and spend more time replacing optics. And so Open's not inexpensive. And then the power factor for USPSA is a big deal. If it continues to be at 107, 65, where we run 169, 170 as a rule, then you're going to wear guns out faster. And so a barometer here, we were talking about gun wear, and I don't know that we had a conclusion to that, but there really shouldn't be, because you don't know, right? Anywhere from 40K to, you might have to have a major rebuild all the way up to 100. Well, we just had a trade-in Titan. One of the first Titans ever was at an indoor range, and it came back to us with 126,000 documented rounds. Wow. And it came back because the front sight fell off. So, okay, we'll take that. I actually bought that gun back from them because I wanted to have it so badly. But barrel life still looked really good. If we kick off here, because Instagram's going to kick us off, go on to Facebook. We'll tail out here into Facebook. But so the barrel looked good. I don't know how much life it had left in it, but the barrel had some light. The threads, the rifling looked good. So that's the open gun life. Probably, I'm making up a number here, but probably half. Half to 75% of a normal gun, because we're running all these extra things. Now, if you do what Jimmy used to do in the desert and run them super hot and shoot every week and abuse them, then we start shrinking that life. So. And then the last part, this is the part I really wanted to talk about. And I'm hopeful. I think Dawn and I might sign some letters, and I'll petition USPSA. I believe the power factor should be lowered, but to 145. Something we could run plus P ammo in. We could still have a power factor, but and it'd be safer, and the guns would last a lot longer. But on the thought that they don't do that in the near future. The ammo really makes a difference, right? And so when you're running 9mm or 38 and you have something go wrong, so you have a bad batch of powder, you have bullet setback, there's a bevy of things that could go wrong. We have extra pressure in the gun, that extra pressure shortens the gun's life. In the worst case, right that day, right that second, boom, you blew the gun up. Gun's going to need a new top end or a new frame or whatever you broke. But so I guess in parting, what guys, the cleanest 1 or 2 line sentence that you give a brand new open shooter. The guy's committed. He's 3 nights of no sleep. He's going to do it. Don, what would be your advice there?
Be meticulous, go over your ammo regularly, maintenance, check screws, when you practice, watch what the gun does. Every once in a while, watch the recoil out of it. Just keep an eye on your equipment, be vigilant and make sure that it actually operates the way it should.
Jimmy?
From that, I would say, again, plan on getting 2 right out of the gate, and don't take the cheap route on anything running in open. Get the best springs, listen to the builders. Hey, this is what we're recommended. We're going to use in the guns. That's what you should do. Look at some of the top guys in terms of what they're running for optics, and then understand that they also tend to have unlimited access to that stuff. So talk with people, find out what works, get it on the gun, and then shoot a lot of that setup once you find it. The other piece to echo what Don was saying, like even at the beginning of my practices, the first 10, 12 rounds, I'm looking over at the catch area just to see where the brass is landing. Is it extracting the right way? Is it hitting? Is it coming out at weird angles? Because then you can tell you're starting to have either eject or extractor fade or fail. So, I mean, the meticulous, it's truly, you've got to pay attention. You're talking hundreds of seconds split the difference in open. So it's how well is your ammo? Did you gauge all your ammo? Did you check everything twice? There's a lot of meticulous. Now, if you're willing to commit that amount of time, then have at it. It's the most fun. It is an absolute adrenaline rush. But understand it's hard work.
Yeah, the ammo is way more critical. I think that's the
Yes.
If you're making bad ammo, you will break guns faster, much faster. So the ammo is we just had some pressure tested today. So your normal 9mm is 35,000 psi. A plus P is 38,500, and our ammo right off my brass. I loaded the brass for the pressure testing. Has a special brass that's ideal, but we were at about 54 to 55,000 psi, and so that is the absolute limit of that.
Let me ask you a quick question, Adam. We're talking about round counts on these guns. How many pressure spikes do you think that an open gun sees? Especially 9. I'm going to throw 9 under the bus here on this one. How many pressure spikes do you think it sees out of that 50,000 rounds? Let's just say the blanket statement, most guns 50,000 rounds, that's what we're shooting for, or whatever. How many times do you really think that gun is beyond overpressured?
A really good reloader, less than 100. A bad reloader, all 8,000 till it breaks.
Well, that's
I've seen guys with bad loading practices that broke, parts early, and usually at this point, if that happens, I'll make you send me ammo before if we fix something, I want to shoot it with your ammo. And I've seen guys making ammo that's way over. I mean, just way over. And the guns will take, a well-built gun,
sure,
will probably take it for 5 or 8K. Not going to take it for 50.
No, wow.
But there's no way. I mean, if some open shooter told you that they made 50,000 rounds and not one of those was going to spike over 55,000 rounds, it's just not how it works.
Yes. Agreed.
I don't even know if you could do that with that equation with a brand new Camdex loader and all brand new brass, because partly what you can't control is the powder, right? You don't make the primer, you don't make the powder. The powder, we're seeing all kinds of variables in the powder, where you buy lot to lot, the powder is not really good, and some of your older powder companies, Vitavori and some of those guys, really consistent, but they're not 100%, right? And the same thing with the brass. Look, people think that these magical machines, whether it be a CNC machine or a brass making machine or whatever it is, bullet making machine, all make the exact same thing a million times in a row, and they don't. That's not how manufacturing works. And so just lot to lot with your brass, you can have a brass where the wall is just a little thin in the one spot it can't be.
Well, Adam, that goes, this adds a lot of weight to what Don was making the comment around. It's your meticulous. Every time you change a component out, every time there's a new lot of powder, you get a new run of brass, particularly with super compound, you've got to go out and retest. You've got to make sure it does what you thought it was going to do. Because even with VIT out in the desert, we would see some big swings lot to lot. No, so did you need to load 9.5 or are you still trying to load 10.2? You know what I mean?
That's a huge difference, right? And then what people don't realize about powder is a lot of times the powder's pressure and your velocity are linear until they're not. And the minute that they're not, the pressure's through the roof.
Right.
You're not necessarily gaining much velocity, but all of a sudden we've gone make up numbers, but from 55 to 75,000 PSI, and we're only getting an extra 40 feet per second.
Remember back in the day, Adam shooting clays and limited, you would get that. You could hear that pop, pop, bang. You're like, whoa, what was that? And it's like, oh, you know, a little bit off, and that stuff would go right through the roof. Yeah,
clays with a 40 cal bullet trying to make major is right on the line of this pressure spike.
Yep.
And it's not a lot of powder. I don't know. It's probably less than 5 grains, I think. It doesn't take much. And then remember, too, I think Don said something earlier, or maybe it was Jimmy, but we're running, some of these guys are, I mean, my presses run at 2,200 rounds an hour, right? So when that powder drops that fast, it's not perfect. You're going to get high and low lots. You just are.
So, and what's the counter to that? So if you need 7, you go to 7.1 or 7.15 to make sure that you're always going to make major. And then when that 7.15 jumps to 7.2, you're like, ooh, that was a little hotter than you expected.
Right. And we get bullet set back, and then the other part too, and people don't ever talk about this, but if you're reloading, what happens when you got a little piece of debris in there? Primer pocket.
Yeah.
You know, what does that do to the pressure? I don't even know the answer, but I mean, it does something with the pressure band here. You know, there's a million cobwebs are the worst, and there's all those things that go into the process. But so in closing, I make good ammo if you're going to shoot open, and understand that it is not, you're not going to be a world champion with one gun in the bag. That's it's not the thing. And guns are going to wear out. They're going to require maintenance. If you need a gun, call Dawn. We're out of the open gun business for a hot minute. We're on a redesign for the 2.0 Chaos, which is, I know everybody's probably itching to know. I don't have the final design done yet. We're prototyping as we speak, but it'll be a slower process. I'm not an open shooter, so I'm not in a huge rush to finish that project. So Randy's testing these guns as we speak, but that gun's probably out mid to late 21, so we're about a year away.
Hybrid barrel for sure.
Probably, yeah, the entire way, right? So,
you don't even need the top of the slide. Don't worry about it. It's all good.
It's overrated.
Jimmy and Don, thank you so much. I think we kicked some good information out to the folks who might be new to this, and that was the goal. So I appreciate your time.
Oh, I appreciate the invite.
Thank you.
Hope to shoot with you guys next year, at least Jimmy.
Oh, heck yeah. My dad still lives in Vermont. I got to get up there and shoot. I got to come.
Thank you again, guys. We'll see you guys all soon.
Thank you. Bye, guys.